Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Realms Commune. So, this is the place where we intend to tell real stories, real experiences, give answers, explore some lore, some myths, and create a sanctuary so that everybody can feel supported in their own experiences. So, I'm Lalo, therapist by trade, and I'll let the rest of the team introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Laramie and I am a social worker, but I'm here to kind of give a more personal, kind of feel everything out kind of perspective.
I'll go next. My name is Mario, and I'm more of an aficionado for this stuff, and I like everything that has to do with the paranormal and everything that has to do with the non-paranormal. So I'm here to put my point of view on the paranormal kind of things.
And I'm Gaia. I am a screenwriter and an author with a background in history, with a degree and a PhD. And I'm here to explore the historical consistency about the paranormal, supernatural, and the themes.
So, Realms is designed to be a space for people who live through things that they can't fully explain and how they change them. We're not here to prove what happened. We're not here to diagnose or dismiss it. We're here to talk about the impact, how these things affect identity, relationships, culture, and the way people move through the world afterwards. So, if your experience was real, the impact it had on you was real.
All right, so the topic for this podcast, kind of starting us out, is going to address something that occurs in one out of every 13 person and has affected 8% of people worldwide. That is sleep paralysis. At least one in every 13 people have experienced an episode of sleep paralysis. Now, sleep paralysis is a very broad kind of thing. It includes hypnagogic hallucinations. It can be sleepwalking, night terrors, hypnagogic hallucinations, which is the just seeing things as you are kind of switching between the sleep stage and the waking stage. So you're in the REM stage. That's the dreaming stage. And that's when you kind of like your brain is starting to process everything going on. They often occur as you're falling asleep. It can start out as a peaceful, kind of normal sleep. And then as you're transitioning into the different,
Because we know
during these incidences, people have often reported strange noises, ghostly sightings, and sensations of being touched during the night. And that's why a lot of these are claimed to be paranormal in nature. Um, And also, an interesting fact is that sleep paralysis and the hypnagogic hallucinations have been associated with being abducted by aliens. When most people say they've experienced an abduction, they talk about being frozen, being lifted up, seeing lights, seeing figures in their room. And the thing is that what it does is that there's a part of the sleep paralysis called the vestibular motor hallucinations. And this is the perception of movement, like flying, spinning, or feeling like your soul is separating from your body, an out of body experience. And this is because in the REM stage, the dream activity is affecting the brain's balance and motion perception systems. So that's why a lot of people who claim they've been abducted is really hard to say yes or no.
So, another thing that I think I know as well is that part of the reason why sleep paralysis happens the way that it does is that as you're going to from not sleep to sleep, so that you're not kicking and screaming, right? Your body almost puts you in a paralyzed type mode. Hence, kind of the paralysis, but people don't fully wake up. And that's where dreams basically enter real life. Are you guys familiar with sleep paralysis?
Yeah, of course. In fact, it's said, at least on the Hispanic culture, that when people are experiencing sleep paralysis, the death, that's what they call it, the death is on top of you. It's very interesting because um, a lot of people have actually described a being um, being on top of them, and oddly enough, I've heard as well that the same are being described in different parts of the world, which is still unexplained because you're talking about different cultures, different countries, different places where people are experiencing the exact same thing.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you bring that up because, and my further research is that there are other things that are considered that are associated with the sleep paralysis, and that is shadow figures and the infamous Hat Man. And every culture has something along those lines. Like you said, like in the British and the Anglophone culture, there's a thing called the old hag, which is basically a female figure that sits on your chest that is causing you to have pain breathing or you can't breathe.
Is there anything in Italy, Gaia, that you're
Well,
familiar with?
historically speaking, the female figures press down upon you when you sleep and you cannot wake up or you cannot move are also the origin of the myth of the incubi and succubi, those female entities who preys upon your sexual fantasies and
Always the
upon
females.
your sexual energy.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
really cool that you actually bring that up, Gaia, because there are, like I said, there was the vestibular motor hallucinations, but there's also two other forms of the hypnagogic hallucinations, and one of them is the incubus hallucination, which is the feeling of pressure on a chest or the abdomen, and the sensation of being suffocated, strangled, or even assaulted by a malign force that comes from a mythical demon. And then there's also the intruder hallucination, which this was more what's more the shadow figure and the hat man is a sense there's another being or presence in the room. And you might hear footsteps, breathing, voices. So that is actually kind of cool that that all kind of aligns together. So, as everybody probably knows, the Hat Man is one of the most infamous, talked about paranormal entity when it comes to sleep paralysis. However, what's really interesting, what I have found in my research, is that even though he's very commonly reported, it actually wasn't until we had Nightmare on Elm Street that people really talked about. And even in descriptions, they report the Hat Man as described as very tall, about 6 feet, wearing a fedora or a top hat. So basically, it's that we saw this movie, and even if you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger is a big horror icon. Everybody knows Freddy Krueger. Knows his story, knows his power of going into your dreams and killing you. And so that's how basically our brain perceived us seeing this unknown image because our brain does not like things being unknown. It tries to make sense of everything. That's why we dream, is that is our brain processing all these memories and everything we have. And so it's like, oh, well, this is just a weird looking figure. Well, let's go ahead and let's put it to something that we know. And we know Freddy Krueger. So that's a very I found like a very interesting kind of thing that that this form of Hat Man didn't come about until then, because like we've talked about earlier, there in every culture is some sort of Hat Man, some sort of entity. In like in the Middle East, in North Africa, they have the jinn, which is supernatural being or demon that causes paralysis by sitting on and choking the sleeper. And some even have mentioned about that a jinn wearing a wide hat. There's South Africa, which is the Tokolosh, a dwarf-like water spirit. And then there's one in Catalonia, Spain, called the Pasanta, which is actually an enormous black dog or cat thought to sit on your chest. And then in the only other country and culture that had something similar to the Hat Man was in in Italy, and if I pronounce this wrong, I do apologize. It's l'uomo nero,
L'uomo
now
nero.
yeah, known as the black man, and it's often depicted as a tall man in a dark coat and hat. And that's like the closest that I found that comes to our view of the Hat Man.
Mario, are you
Mm,
familiar with the Hetman?
I mean, there is a version of the Hatman in Mexico because
Okay.
there is what's called el Señor del Sombrero, which literally means the guy in the hat. Um,
Okay.
Again, with everything that just got said, and the fact that it's happening all over the world, to me, that is proof enough that the paranormal is there.
Mhm.
So, not to try
In
to.
in Britain, we have the Crooked Man. I don't know if it came out in your research. The Crooked Man is, and he's strange and is also interesting because both the Crooked Man in England and L'Uomo Nero in Italy, they are both intended to make children behave because both the Crooked Man and L'Uomo Nero are usually used by parents and grandparents as a way to instill fear in the children to make them behave. Otherwise, the L'Uomo Nero or the Crooked Man will take them away.
And actually interesting, and again, I'm not sure if there's a nursery rhyme
Mm,
that has, and it goes, there once was a crooked man who walked a crooked mile. He had a crooked sixpence, um, on a crooked style. He bought a crooked cat who caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a very crooked house. And that's a nursery rhyme that kids would sing on the playground,
Yeah.
and yeah, very creepy when you think about it, as is most nursery rhymes, as we know, but that'd be probably a
And
topic for another
yes.
time.
And it was made famous by the second movie in the Conjuring saga.
Yes. I
yeah,
know there's been
So
several movies made of the Crooked
yeah,
Man.
but
Yeah, but
yeah,
some better than
absolutely.
others.
Yeah,
I'm sure
some are
that
better than
this will
others. That
be
one wasn't that good.
something that we continue to hear in other stories. It just occurred to me too. So, the way we process memory, right, is that we're built for survival. That's essentially, at the end of the day, what we do as humans. And one of the ways to do that is to kind of preserve energy whenever possible, right? So our brain likes to build templates, right? So I wonder if part of the reason why people see kind of like a shadow figure is because our brain's like almost too lazy to do anything in full detail, you know? You just get like the blank kind of like black kind of shadow
Well,
version of it.
what's interesting is that when I've heard from memory is that memory can't, like, your memory in your brain can't make up faces. So
So,
any face
could
you
be it.
see in your dream is that you've seen somewhere in your day-to-day life. Your brain can't make that up. So perhaps that's why we see these shadow figures, and hence why maybe they give the Hat Man that appearance, because that is something our brain can see, can put to the figure, because it gives us the same sense. Because usually when people see the Hat Man, they describe feelings of dread, of evil, of them being watched, which is basically what Freddy Krueger did to the kids in their dreams.
Also, brains are made to protect us.
Yes.
And so another explanation could be that the Hatman, the Crooked Man, L'Uomo Nero are actually so terrifying that our brain is protecting us from really knowing what they look like.
Hmm.
Well,
That is, yeah.
w- we have to keep in mind, you guys, that the devil's out there to get us, and it's being described all over the world with this, and they're all describing with very similar things. Now, how could you explain something like that when I'm experiencing a paralysis, which I've been very fortunate enough to actually have seen anything? I've experienced paralysis to where I can't move or wake up or speak, which still feels pretty bad, but I haven't seen anything myself. But I have heard many stories of people who have described this being on top of them. Yet I hear other stories of other people around other places of the world that have nothing to do with them that are experiencing kind of the same thing.
So, yeah,
So
and
So I guess that the counter argument to that would just be that, we're all human, right? So we all have the same basic survival instinct. So our brain would probably do the same things kind of like biologically.
And also, that's why, so this whole area of sleep paralysis, is actually a group called the parasomnia, which is actually, in my research, the hardest type of experiences to prove because, again, it's our brain. And even though we have a pretty good understanding of how our brain works, a lot of it is still a mystery. And so, one of the ways that you can try to differentiate to see if it's maybe something paranormal happening or maybe something going on is that there are ways to determine the cause. First is to rule out your external factors, neighbors, pets, changes in sleep environment, because a big thing that causes these and is stress. And that can really trigger them to appear. And even then back to the paranormal side, evil entities and demons like to approach us in our weakest state. And what weaker state are you than when you are stressed and having trouble sleeping because your brain is working so hard that your defenses are down. So that's why, if you're really having these, first line could be going to see a sleep doctor, getting maybe you're having sleep apnea or something else, rule that out. And then, maybe seeing a therapist or taking anti-anxiety meds. And then even you could even put video cameras, some and videotape and see what
About that.
what's going on. I know I used to do a sleep talk app. I would put that by my bed. Fortunately, I never heard anything creepy, but that could be another way to see what exactly is going on. But again, these are some of the hardest cases to prove. And so a lot of it, when people talk about it, you just have to kind of
Hmm.
validate and just be like, well, okay, it could be this, but it could also be this too.
So it kind of on the other side of it, because I was also thinking a little bit of what Mario said, right? There are some people, and I remember us talking about this at some point long ago, where people also wake up with marks, you know, some scratches on their back or stuff like that. That's a little bit hard to kind of explain,
Well, if you
you
have a
know.
pet,
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
but
I know because I have two cats, and I know I've probably woken up with some scratches on my face. Now, granted, it was just like one scratch. It's not like what is it, the three?
right, your cat shouldn't be scratching you though, but that's
Well,
its
they
own
tend to
story.
more like fall and land on me, and very ungrateful cat
But I'm
things.
saying like not very
Right.
clearly cat induced scratches, you know? Now that, right, I don't know that there's too much science that can talk about that unless you're doing it unconsciously. But some places are like parts that are almost impossible to reach, you know? Like, isn't there like some parts in your back that you can't
No.
touch if you want to, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I mean, with that being said, I mean that proves my point.
no.
Paranormal is out there to get us. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
And
not saying that there are cases where people suffer some type of mental um, stress that's causing them to have those kinds of paralysis. But on the other hand, I wouldn't rule out, if I start having a bunch of those sleep paralysis and starting seeing those figures, to actually start thinking of a different approach to it.
yeah, definitely because sleep again is when we're our most vulnerable. And especially between that hours of 3 and 4, I was actually seeing is when if you are going to die in your sleep, that is the most
Hmm.
often the time you will die is between 3 and 4. Because that's for some reason that's when the human body is the weakest, which I thought was kind of cool yet kind of creepy. And
That's because between 3 and 4, it's the moment in which the liver let go of the toxins that
oh,
it's helping us to clean off. And so, what happens when you build up toxins and you cannot clean them off. So, is also the moment your cleanse should happen. And it's also for them one of the most delicate moments of the day. So there could be a scientific explanation why 3 and 4 is such a critic moment in our bodies and why they are at their weakest state.
That's actually very interesting scientifically. And of course, we all know in the more paranormal, the 3 is the witching hour. So that's really cool. That kind of correlation. And the one good thing is though that there can be ways people have found that can protect them from these sleep paralysis. And I always love, the big thing I like is the cultures and what items they'll use to ward off these evil spirits. And so some cultures they say keeping iron objects under your bed is a way, using salt as a very common, we see that in all cultures, is the salt, putting garlic and herbs under your pillow, anointing a room or bed with oil as a symbol of the divine, and even in Balkan folklore, putting a broomstick behind the door. And other people actually will go into the prayers and mantras as a sense of comfort to protect them from this. Those who will believe in Christianity tend to say, if they can, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ, or they will say a prayer, or or if they have a saint that they, cling to, they will actually cry out to that saint. And then also, there's some beliefs called commanding the entity that if you have enough power and confidence, you can actually tell the demon to shut up and go away. Which, some people might say that works. Others might say, please don't antagonize the demon. In fact, in Turkish legends, it is said that if you steal the jinn's hat, then you get to make it your slave. So
That's cool.
it is cool, but again, do so at your own risk. Please. And then, of course, in the more scientific realm, there's the improving the sleep hygiene, lifestyle adjustments, managing the stress, seek medical help. But again, some people really do feel like it is more in the paranormal and they will tend to try to go towards the more spiritual route.
I think, and is an unpopular opinion because I'm Catholic, but I feel like religion, spirituality, and science, they walk on parallel paths. Once you rule out everything that could be scientifically explained, what you are left with is the paranormal.
I agree right there because, at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind that those remedies or tokens or um, things or prayers people have done for many generations, they have worked.
Mhm.
I'm not saying they worked 100% of the time or for everybody, but people keep doing them because why? Yes, because they work.
But also, let's remember that what was once thought to be a supernatural remedy, like herbology, for example, then science explained that some kind of plants work because they are scientifically used to defeat infection, to fight viruses, and things like that. So, once upon a time, it was called witchcraft. But then it was explained with okay, plants have powers, and so on and on. So, most of the time, when we make a very precise division between religion and science, we we risk to cut ourselves off some explanations, because sometimes those two things they walk hand in hand. Because what is magic? Magic is science that we still can't explain.
Mhm.
I mean, some of it is, as I'm thinking about this, I think from a very skeptic point of view, is, kind of the placebo effect, right? If you believe something strong enough, it can also, I guess, like play a role. But I don't know, like if I experience these things, what would be more comforting?
Yeah, no,
I
definitely.
think that our mistakes, one of the mistake we make more often is to believe that is to transfer what should be religion and spirituality into science. If it's something that science says, then we take it like the gospel. And that sometimes science is wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So I think we should keep, our minds a little bit more open.
yeah, no, I mean, I agree. But
Yeah.
I think,
Um, when Lola was talking about the placebo effect, it just came to my mind something I was thinking about the other day. At the end of the day, the placebo effect is that they make you believe something will have an effect on you, and it could be positive, it could be negative. But at the end of the day, where I'm getting at is faith. If you have faith, you are going to be able to do many things. I mean, it's said in the Bible. I'm a believer in everything, and it's kind of one of the main reasons I'm here, because I'm here to defend that. You know, um, God exists, and if God exists, the opposite exists. We have to be ready for whatever comes our way. If science can cure me, sure, but there also has to be faith in whatever you put into it, and
no,
that is the placebo effect at the end of the day.
I think that's the beautiful thing about all of this, right? Is that, in some ways, faith can be the placebo effect. And if it is, then why does it matter? If it does help you, if it helps, makes you be happy, right? And that's the whole thing of this too, that when people experience things, right, it's very easy to kind of, be spectated and say it's like, oh yeah, that's wrong, right? But what people feel is real, and that does matter.
Yeah, and I wish there was a way to be able to pass faith onto somebody else, but unfortunately, there is no way you can pass faith onto another person. But you can always kind of tell them your story, tell them what you believe and what has helped you, to see if maybe that at the end helps them. And hopefully, this group and the many people who will join eventually, we'll be able to help them that way.
Which actually I think is a good segment as listen to a real story of
So,
somebody who experiences sleep
so
paralysis.
the reason why I brought this up is that I have experienced the hypnagogic hallucinations, especially the intruder and the incubus ones. And so that was one of the reasons why we decided to start out with this. So really these began for me when I was in 6th or 7th grade. I'm not sure what age that is, but and as I got older, they got way more intense. When I was young, I had them. They weren't when I'm looking back on them now compared to the ones I have recently, they're not as scary. So like when I was young, I thought they were creepy. So I remember being chased by an old man in a suit with stringy white hair and an awful grin. And I felt like in my sleep I was running and trying to avoid him, and I couldn't. Another one was I was playing a creepy melody music on the piano downstairs and then filling the house and myself with a cold dread. And I remember hearing the melody playing that I played, and it was just basically CDE on the piano over and over. And so these would come and go, but basically I would get like 4 or 5 in a row. And it got to the point where I actually wouldn't sleep. I basically did what the teens did, Nightmare on Elm Street, and I tried to stay awake. I went 3 days with little to no sleep because I was so scared. And I first thought that there was more a scientific thing because I was going through a lot at a young age. I had no full disclosure. I had OCD. I had anxiety, depression. I was bullied. I had several suicide attempts. So I thought it all could be connected. So that's why I went and sought therapeutic help. However, it didn't help. In fact, the therapist told me, well, why don't you try to see the dream all the way through, interact with it? And that was actually the worst advice
I was gonna say.
ever from a therapist because I did try to do that. And let's just say did not work out. Granted, the therapist helped me through my other issues going on, but then there was kind of a gap. They would come and go, but they definitely peaked up again when I was living in Virginia. This is probably around 2017, and I was actually this Lalo became my husband. Hmm?
So I just want to make a comment,
Oh,
or two comments actually. One, again, in terms of that scientific perspective, people that do have anxiety, do have depression, are more prone to have sleep paralysis. That I think in a whole other kind of like solo video, I kind of explained between faith and being vulnerable and things like that. The other thing that's interesting is like I've seen her have them, and she feels like she has no sleep, even though she does sleep some. It's just it comes in like quick spurts and cycles. So I was think that's interesting.
and so some of the worst ones I've actually had have been at least within the last 5 or 6 years, and even more recent. So probably there were two that have still remained with me several years. Like I said, this happened in 2017. Was I was in Virginia, I was living alone, and I had one of Lalo's hoodies because we were doing long distance. And I kept one of his hoodies with me so I could wear it around the house. So I started sleeping, and I did have one of the hallucinations, but it wasn't that bad. Woke up. So then I grabbed Lala's hoodie and put it over me because I was feeling because that was my form of protection, my sense of comfort. And as I was falling back asleep, there was a dark, evil voice that said, "You think that will keep you safe?" And it was so clear. It was like somebody had bent down and said in my ear that. And I struggled to wake. And when I did, I felt an intense cold sensation on my shoulder. And then when I woke up, touched my shoulder, and it was freezing. Like right here, like where there would have been a handprint, freezing, but the rest of my body was warm. So yeah, so that was the one. And then there was one I guess like a year after that was when we finally moved in together. Was we were in a new apartment because I was thinking maybe it was that apartment, maybe there was something there. But this as I was falling asleep, I started having it, and I was awake. But where I feel like my eyes are open, they're apparently not, according to Lalo. But I feel like my eyes are open, and I could hear Lalo breathing. I could hear my cats purring and them breathing, and then out of like nowhere, there was this shadows everywhere, and there were hands just grabbing me. They had like my hair, my arms, my legs. I remember I was screaming and thrashing, but I wasn't moving. And I thought I was yelling for a sound. And then there was like one that actually like grabbed my neck. And I feel like I was being pulled and dragged into darkness. And it was actually during this time that I found my patron saint, Saint Cecilia. And I remember even crying out to her because this was something Lala and I talked about possibly doing. And I remember crying out in my dream or my hallucination, Saint Cecilia, please help me, please help me. And I was actually able to break free from that. And so that was this like then that was those are probably been my two most horrific, impactful um, dreams. And what's interesting is that after that moment, we actually did a cleansing in the house. Lalo found the video on YouTube. Went around the house and we put holy water and we put oil and I guess like soil in this one area, this one corner where everything I kept seeing. And after that, I didn't have them. Well, at least I didn't have them very often. So again, was it placebo effect or did we actually ward something away? And that's not something I don't think we'll ever get an answer to.
I think the interesting part, especially of that, if I remember correctly, was that this was during a time when she was definitely a lot more spectacle about just religion or any like the power of God working. I was like, well, why don't we just try it? Why don't we just do that? And she was like, okay. It's not like at that point that she was like, yeah, this is gonna help protect me. She was actually very much kind of like, yeah, I don't know. All right.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember being more worried about him getting one of my pictures wet with the water. And he was like, it's going to have to happen. And I'm like, okay, but can you do it around the picture? But so, I mean, in all honesty, am I, a believer? Did I convert to a faith? No. But it's definitely, I mean, I definitely identify as agnostic. I'm definitely not saying that there is nothing. I do think there is something out there. I do think we do have protectors. And I think that, you know, even through him, something has kind of protected us from this. And I do feel like I do have the protection of my patron saint, Saint Cecilia. Again, is it placebo or is it true? Who knows? And that's why again, this field, the parasomnia, is so difficult to really answer.
Well, it's hard to explain like scientifically what's happening, but I mean it's there. The things are happening in front of us. Whether some people want to admit that it's true or not, or just trying to look for a scientific name to give it, that's a different story. It's there, it's happening, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people who think that it's just because they don't believe in anything or they don't think there's a God or a devil or anything. It's not going to happen to me because I don't believe in those things. Trust me, it'll happen to everybody, anybody who's susceptible um, to those things. And I mean, you've had it rough, very rough. I didn't know a bunch of the stuff you just told us. And when I was a kid, if I would have told my dad or my mom, "Listen, I just had this dream and this guy was chasing me and everything," and they wouldn't have taken me to a psychiatrist or to a counselor or somebody to give me therapy. They would have prayed with me, and it would have gone away because that's what we believe. If you are being attacked by something that doesn't look to belong to this world, which is exactly that, they're gonna go directly to the spiritual way of trying to fix it. If I had a headache, if I had a heartburn, if my leg was hurting, the doctor would be the one to answer those questions. But it was totally what you said. Unfortunately, what happened to you was just the effect of not having parents that are really leaned over to the spiritual,
Mhm.
which is kind of sad to be honest, because I think that you could have easily have avoided all of that if your parents would have been a little bit more leaned into the spiritual and would have gotten you the spiritual help from the very beginning.
No, and
Because you know,
yeah, and that is something that I have, wondered because, yes, I grew up in a very scientific household. My dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse, and even my sister is a doctor. I've always been kind of the more, as they like to call, the whimsical, flighty, kind of like daydreamer type imagination. Like they always claimed I had a very overactive imagination. And yeah, they're more of that. If I can see it, then I believe it. And that's why they did go the medical route was because of that. And yes, maybe if they had been a little more in the faith and directed me towards that way, could it have? I don't know, but
But
Man, in our lives, there's a lot of I don't know what would have happened
yes.
if I'd have done this way. But I think personally think that it would have definitely have helped. What do you think?
but there are more things between Earth and the sky than what your science can explain. And if we believe that we have a soul in the same way as we have a body, when our body is suffering, we go to the doctor, but where we go when it's our soul that is suffering.
Very great way of putting it. Yeah. It's like who heals the
And
soul?
from a Catholic perspective, in the past few years, the school for exorcists reopened in the Catholic University in Rome because more and more people are seeking help from priests and exorcists.
Wow.
And that means something. That must mean something because we know uh, the road to see an exorcist is actually very long and very complicated. It's not like, oh my God, I think I am possessed. I go to the exorcist. No, it's, oh, I think something could be wrong. You go to your priest, and before you see an exorcist, you see basically every single doctor you can think about. And that means psychiatrists, general doctors, specialists for every aspect of your body. And when and only if every single test come out negative, you go back to your priest. Your priest goes to the bishop, and only then the bishop decides if you can see an exorcist or not.
I
It's not
actually
like it's
uh,
not like people think, oh my God, you see an exorcist for every single trouble you can have. No, actually, many people will never see an exorcist in their whole lives. And that's very good for them, for obvious reasons.
I want to bring something. I want to say something to that. It's kind of interesting. Um, I went through a stage in my life a few years ago, and I guess I'm very fortunate that I happen to know an exorcist priest around here. He uh, he lives just like 3 hours away, and I happened to get his number one time when he was visiting our church. And this thing it was happening to me that I kind of felt very kind of depressed and really bad thoughts coming into my mind and everything being the way I am. I started thinking more on the spiritual realm of things, and so I decided to give him a call. And he started doing some prayers with me and everything. And he was like, "I'm gonna say something in Latin that if you have something within you, you are going to react." And he did, and nothing happened. And then after that, I was like, maybe I should go to the doctor and talk to him and see. And I got medicine, and like 2 weeks after that, my problems were over.
so
See?
interestingly enough, in the video, my most recent video, I actually kind of talk a little bit of why the church did decide to also start putting medical standards, and that's very much because of things relating to cases kind of like what happened with Annalise Michelle, aka the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Um, and that just almost became a bloodbath in its own way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I have to say, knowing that the church does and the exorcist program does have these safeguards, like you have to rule out the medical, you have to, all of that, I think does make it a little bit more credible in a sense, because it is such a process. I mean, even when all of that is, cleared, they still have to get permission. It's not this like they're just tossing out exorcists door to door, being like, here you go, have your exorcism. Like, it's an actual process.
Kind of thinking about it, and I think Mario just kind of summed it up perfectly. But this is the whole thing of what, again, this project is about. The whole commune's about, and that's just being kind of open minded, right?
Mhm.
Your feelings are real. What you think is real, right? He thought that he felt something, right? He talked to the priest. It turned out to be nothing. He explored something else. It's very much when people stay in one lane, and it's like my lane has to be right.
Just like I stuck in the scientific realm, and then, meaning Lala went to into the spiritual for my, ailments, and it worked. So, that's what you do is you just one thing doesn't work, you try another.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I appreciate all of you for being here and listening to us. Um, if anybody does have a story that they want to submit, please feel free to email it to us at the realmscommune@gmail.com. We'd love to kind of hear it and talk more. We can dissect a little bit again of the lore, the myths around it, and just kind of give our different perspectives on it.
And, know that you can be anonymous. You don't have to give your name or anything like that. You can just send a story. You can use a little pen name or whatever. Or if you do use your real name, you can let us know, hey, please don't mention it, and we will totally respect that. So we'll do full anonymity here.
Mario, got any last thoughts?
Yeah, it's very exciting to have started this project with you guys. Hopefully the community will grow. And hopefully, we'll be able to give some really good advice to anybody who decides to join us, and just to kind of let them know they're not alone in this world. Sometimes it feels that way, but we want to make it to where they know that they have somebody on their side, and we can try to find solutions, either the medical way, the scientific way, or the spiritual way, the way of God.
And there is an argument that many people who don't believe always bring up, and is why, if God really exists, he didn't give me faith? Because he gave you the free will. And that means that maybe out there are people who are skeptic because they still didn't find their answers. And maybe we can help them one way or another. Why not?
Yeah, and in translation
Yeah.
of that, I think that just means community. We
Truthfully.
support each other. So, yeah, any last thoughts?
No, pretty much sums it. They did great summing it all up.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Till next time.
Till next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.